Hi everyone, I'm Xiaoyu. My teammates are Shuyu and Da. Next slide, please. We localized a C# game called Top-Down Car Racing Game. The player can press the left and right arrows to move their car to avoid other cars. The player gains points if they don't crash into other cars. The player wins a bronze medal when they earn more than 0 points, a silver medal when they earn more than 500 points, and a gold medal when they earn more than 2,000. For the source file, the source language of the user interface is English. The original application has one Windows form and one resource file of images, as the screenshots show. So for the target file, we made some changes. First of all, we added a language picker. We added a second window forms as a language picker and added a radio button for each target language. The player can choose between English, Simplified Chinese, French, and Spanish. Once the player selected a language and hit the select button, the UI culture would be set according to the selected language. So the UI language of the game will be changed as well. When the player's car crashed into other cars, the game ends and displays an image showing whether the player wins a bronze, silver, or gold medal. We localized these pictures using Adobe Illustrator. We imitated the source text font style, for example, the text colors and the gradient style. For the localized images, we added a second resource file in properties. In this file, we added the 9 existing images and it automatically generated codes so that we could directly use the image name in the code. Finally, we added else-if statements where necessary to switch images according to the current UI culture. Lastly, we fixed some minor issues, like the string concatenation issues in line 185. And we also adjusted the start button size.
To turn the source into the target, here are the steps to best practices we followed. First, create resource files for each locale to have the strings translated. Second, to localize images that contain text. Thirdly, create a language selector window that links to the original game. And then we match orders from the language selector to resource file of each locales. And in the end, we do quality check to review if the game is fully localized.
Now let's talk about some challenges we met during the project. The first challenge we met is to think of a way to add a language selector. At first, we wanted to just add some drop-down boxes or radio buttons to the original form. It failed because once we added that, the arrow keys seemed to be dysfunctional, thus the game couldn't work. We figured out soon that we can make a new form as an individual language selector to select language first, then run the game. That is to say, the program should contain 2 forms, with one being the language selector and one being the actual game. This was easy to fix, so we just add a new form. In this form, you can see here, we give a button and 4 radio buttons. The code here was easy too. Once any radio buttons is checked, we just set UI culture to the target language. Soon we ran into the second issue. After the new form was added, when we ran the program, the form popping up is the game form instead of the new form we added. We wanted the language selector form to run first, so we can set the language first. After some research online, luckily, we found this one is pretty easy to fix too. We just went to program.cs and changed form 1 to form 2, and that would do, as the picture here indicated. However, just when we thought about everything was done and the program is good to go, the third challenge appeared. Here is some demonstration of the issue we ran into back then. Basically, when we choose a language and click selected button, here we select French, but the game is still in English. When we close, we selected French again, now it's French. This issue seems to have a pattern. The language finally shown in the game seems to be the one selection behind the actual selection. After some investigation, we realized that the reason probably is that the site UI culture method only set the language in form1.cs, but later in form1.designer.cs. Thus, we always saw a delay in language selection. We tried a few different ways to fix this, but all of them failed. Finally, we fixed this issue by adding all the user-faced strings to form1.cs again. And here you can see the language selector and game run perfectly. We choose English. Now the interface is in English. French. Yep.
So after overcoming all those challenges, we also got some interesting observations from the experience of this project. First is that it seemed to us that apparently the designers of the game might have not put internationalization into consideration simply because there were no comments in the codes of directions for adding instruments for localization, and there were no resource files for the source strings created. This is not something to blame them for. However, we could have some ideas about what should be included when we want to embed internationalization at the designing phase for a game like this. The second thing is about looking for help. In this project, we got hints from David that we should create another Windows form if we want to do a language selector. And during the project, we had our past assignments as references. We searched around on Stack Overflow and we prompted the internet for clues. But these processes weren't easy at the beginning because it took time for us to phrase our questions and prompts into the right way. This is interesting because although there are professionals and pretty intelligent technologies out there as resources, they won't be helpful if we cannot phrase our questions correctly. Next, please. And last but not the least, here are some lessons we learned from this project. First, from the technical aspect, we came to understand that all works get easier when you read the assets correctly. And secondly, from the project management aspects, we chose to have our files shared in our group chat this time. It worked well because we had plenty of discussions in the group chat and we could look for whatever we shared at whatever moments by searching chat history, and it was very easy to find the previous versions of stuffs. But we do believe that for a bigger project that has a longer timeline and more complex assets, it should be better to create a shared working space and to have the documents stored in somewhere safer. And for file naming conventions, I think we did a good job in including dates, persons who made the edits, and what was the major update briefly in the name of the files. I really appreciate that effort. So that's it. Thank you everyone for listening.